Chapter 16. The fluid dimensional shift had been so poetic compared to the now jarring spasms that I woke up to. At first I was wondering if I'd inhaled vomit and was now having some sort of choking attack, but those don't normally talk to me, I'd hope. "Dude! Mender, wake up! Are you okay?" I heard in a quiet but sturdy male voice. My eyes opened up abruptly to stare right in at his emerald ones. The little purple lizard stood over me, an expression of seeming concern adorning his face. I winced and pushed a hoof against my right temple, trying to shove the splitting headache out of my skull. Ow. Yeah, I'm alright, Spike. I think I passed out last night and fell, I excused, telling most of the truth. Oh, it was enough of the truth to hurt like hell. I probably had hit my head when I fell over, but I vaguely recall being on my knees to throw up anyway, so I probably wasn't too far of a drop. Spike looked momentarily unsure before smiling and nodding again. "Well, as long as you're not hurt or anything. You're nice and all, so it would not be good if something were wrong." "Oh, and I would go totally spastic again. You should have heard her yesterday," he complained, rolling his eyes before walking back over to the counter where I'd gotten my drink last night. He went under the counter over, withdrawing what appeared to be a paper towel. "Are you sick, though? You should let her know when she gets up, if so," he followed up before getting ready to clean up my rather large mess. "Those two are still asleep?" I questioned in earnest interest before tapping my left hoof to the wooden floor. The barrier formed almost instantly under the mess, and I scooped it up using a bowl shape in one fell swoop. "Sorry about the mess, by the way. I think it was something I ate," I tacked on, gesturing to the bowl of rather disgusting smelling liquid. Well, it used to be liquid. I decided not to think about it lest I make myself sick again. "Oh, sweet. I wish Twilight helped me clean up stuff. Thanks. I totally forgot they had that crazy magic, too. But yeah, I usually get up before. I usually make her breakfast, too," he informed me as he walked over to a nook in the counter and slid a garbage can out. I winced as I dumped the contents into it, and he rapidly tied it off. "You cook? You seem to be like a little brother to Twilight. Isn't she supposed to be the responsible one?" I asked, smirking as he tried to pull the now much heavier plastic bag out of the can. "Ha! You'd think so, but we actually do it this way for safety. You saw her cooking at the party. I thought Rainbow was going to die," he warned, sounding actually shocked. I felt the blood seep out of my head. "Oh. Yikes. I thought that was because it was just really old," I muttered, shuddering before lifting the bag out of the can with my teeth. Spike smiled as I helped him again and latched onto the bottom of the can, using his weight to help me pull it off. "Nah, Tolly's too early to let things sit in the fridge for that long. Pinky made that up. She'd only cooked that up like 3 days before. It wasn't exactly, edible by the time she was done. It was a total waste of potatoes and celery, if you ask me." More blood dribbled away, and I felt faint, still glad my stomach was still empty. "Potatoes and celery? I thought that was pancake batter," I admitted, swallowing warily. Note to self, if I ever felt suicidal, have Twilight cook for me. "Exactly," he returned, winking at me before opening the door. We took the bag out of the front and set it down next to the end of the walkway leading up to the library. Hoped no pony got too close. The smells alone might incapacitate an unlucky pony. "Thanks a ton, Mender. Having you living here is going to be awesome. You want some breakfast too?" he asked, turning briefly to catch up as I walked back inside. "Well, if it's not too much trouble, I can try to help if you want," I offered, smiling over at the little guy. He was nice enough of a lizard thing when it came down to it. His eyes widened a little and he asked, "For real? You'll actually help me cook?" Was it that much of a surprise? I paused, but nodded simply, wondering if I was missing something. "Woo!" he exclaimed before hopping into the air and raising his fist. I snickered momentarily before he rotated and landing on me during his second jump, almost knocking me over sideways. "You're awesome. Let's go make breakfast then," he agreed from his newly discovered sitting position on my back. I raised an eyebrow back at him, but he only grinned. "Twilight must have you riding on her back then?" I questioned before heading back up inside the library. He wasn't heavy at all, honestly. If he hadn't been rather on the warm side, I probably wouldn't be able to tell he was riding on me. Webb flashed with energy and the door slid shut after we entered. "Oh, sorry. I didn't even ask if I could," he suddenly apologized. I glanced back at him with a smile and shook my head. "You're not that heavy, so it's okay. I just wasn't expecting it," I explained as we entered the kitchen. Now that I peeked around a little more, I noticed that he was right. Everything was ordered, tidy, and practically immaculate. It struck me as almost compulsive, but I knew better than to say anything to the mayor, or that wouldn't be the only thing that struck me, I figured. Then I suddenly got an idea as we entered the kitchen. "Hey, Spike, why don't I make the mayor's breakfast in bed?" I suggested, looking back up at the little fellow. He thought about it for a second before smirking. "Dang, I wish I'd thought of that before. You really know how to impress the ladies, Mender. I wonder if Rarity would like breakfast in bed," he mumbled, raising a clawed hand to his chin as he thought out loud. My brain did a flip. Wait, he liked Rarity? The total lack of comprehension shifted my brain into reverse as it rolled downhill at maximum speed. "Whoa, you like Rarity?" I asked before common sense or propriety could caution me otherwise. Spike let out a gasp of shock and stared at me, dumbfounded. "Ah! Don't tell any, Pony. That's supposed to be super secret," he warned, looking at me with pleading eyes. Oh, crap. Why could I not go a day without committing some sort of social atrocity? "Don't worry, Spike. I promise that I'm not going to tell any, Pony. I'll even help you make Rarity breakfast in bed, too, if you want to," I offered, hoping my attempt at blatantly bribing him wasn't too obvious. Wait, there's something odd about that logic. He seemed oblivious, though, and sighed in relief instead. "Thanks, dude. You're a good stallion. Oh, and you're so lucky to have both of them after you," he suddenly exclaimed, probably remembering what he heard last night. I blushed and coughed as he climbed up onto the counter wearing a smirk. "Well, Fluttershy hasn't made any promises, and I'm happy enough to have Twilight. Both mares are amazing for their own reasons, so I'm pretty lucky. Well, in that regard," I admitted, leaving a loophole for the blunt head trauma and injury quota I seem to possess. "Oh, yeah. I'm gonna do the cutting, okay? I know better than let you near sharp objects," he agreed, taking my hint. I laughed and helped him get things out of the fridge that seemed breakfasty. Was that a word? Oh well. Eggs and bread were good, solid choices. Potatoes would work too. I picked on for the veggies as Spike started working with the eggs I had retrieved. It was strange. Every time I had one of those dreams, I felt so weird when I got back. It was a surreal, detached feeling that lingered for as long as I thought about it, which this time was quite a while. What was Keela doing now? She would hopefully be less intrusive from now on, but maybe with her help, I'd be able to solve the link issue without talking to Twilight. A twinge of bitterness slipped in before I could stop it. She'd probably just think I was nuts again, even if I did say anything. "Equestrian Mender, you okay?" Spike suddenly asked, snapping his fingers in front of my muzzle and knocking me out of my thoughts. Oh, yeah, sorry. I was just thinking about something," I excused, attempting to act nonchalant and probably failing in an extremely epic manner. Spike gave me a skeptical eyebrow raise before muttering, "I noticed. The mares won't appreciate burnt breakfast nearly as much, however. Watch the toast for me while I handle the potatoes," he requested in a surprisingly professional tone. Well, when someone spoke like that, one simply had to go along with it. I nodded politely and peeked over at the toaster. Now that I realize it, this is the first time I noticed that Equestrian actually had working electricity. Although I think I should have known this before. I could have sworn I saw a hydroelectric dam by the riverhead. Forcing myself not to get distracted again, I plugged the machine in with a burst of field manipulation around the cord, then stuck the entire stack of bread slices to my hoof with a simple magnetic shift. The little lizard watched in amusement as I took 4 slices and slid them over the top of the toaster, simply releasing them as they were over the slots in one fluid motion. I might as well get magical practice while doing mundane things, right? Magic is so cool. Yours doesn't seem as convenient as Twilight's, though, Spike observed after another moment. Well, that much was true. Yeah, I have to touch things I want to mess with. Having a horn must be amazing. I agreed wistfully. I can think of a few ways around the limitation, but walking around with a bunch of ribbons tied to my left ankle wouldn't do wonders for my already suffering image as a stallion. Maybe some sort of hoof-to-hand glove I could build with movable parts? That might go the other direction, though, and scare ponies. I gently reminded myself that I was supposed to be cooking when the toast popped up, arced through the air, and unerringly skipped off my nose. I let out a squeak before lashing out with a bunch of force fields from my hoof, catching all of the slices in a makeshift bowl. The little purple lizard started giggling in amusement at my quick recovery, then clapped as I managed to get all the slices safely back onto the counter. Your luck is still just as bad, but at least you're getting better at the recovery part, he complimented, pulling a flat dull knife out and dipping it into a small tub of butter nearby. What interesting ways to prepare food. It made sense from what I've been subjected to so far in meals. They prepared things similarly to the exotic dishes I vaguely remembered being imported from our tentative treaty with those other aliens. They had such complex ways to prepare food. It was a little weird, but I guess I'd get used to it. Our species, when not subjected to preserved military meal rations, kept things simple and mixed. Chopped, diced, or stringed meat mixed with light grains and maybe a bit of sauce for flavor. The sauce was typically made from either fruits or vegetables. I remember a lot of spicy peppers mixed in as well as the occasional fruity tang if the meat was sweet. My stomach growled as I put in the next set of 4 toasts and I whimpered. Spike smirked and nodded, complaining, "Yeah, I always get hungry when cooking too. Seeing all this awesome food in front of me and not being able to touch it is like teasing, even if it's not what I really want to eat." My attention focused on his mouth while he was talking, and once again saw the rows of pointed teeth. Was he carnivorous? "Do you eat meat sometimes?" I questioned gently, having gotten too curious for my own good. To my defense, I wasn't expecting the look of utter horror that the little guy displayed. "Ew! No way, dude! I never eat any kind of meat," he denied instantly, taking a step backwards and away from me. "Okay then. That hadn't been the reaction I was expecting." I chalked yet another social blunder onto my quota for today. Damn, I'd only been up for half an hour. "Oh, sorry. I didn't mean to offend. I just saw your teeth and I didn't think that looked like something a pure herbivore would have," I explained hastily in attempts to calm the little guy down. He exhaled and seemed to relax before sticking a finger into his mouth and running the claw along his teeth as if having just noticed himself. "Well, I guess I see the mistake. They're for crushing and chewing gemstones, though, not meat," he corrected. "What?" My brain stalled as I blinked slowly at him. Gemstones? He eats crystal and mineral deposits that have been processed into faceted gems? All dragons eat gems, I guess. They taste really, really good and make my tummy feel better when it's aching," he expanded upon, seeing my empty expression. Oh, he was a dragon then, not a lizard. My mind strained to remember anything I could about the word. The only place I had recalled seeing it was in an old book that was imported, once again, from our estranged allies. It was starting to make me a little paranoid now that I considered it. A lot of that alien culture seemed to be popping up around here, although to them even dragons were a myth. Something fictitious that existed purely in imagination and fantasy. He was a living, breathing example of one, I think. I wondered how close the little guy matched to their myths. "So you're a dragon? I think I recall reading that they can breathe fire," I muttered upon later, tilting my head towards him. He grinned in the same instant and exhaled, blasting a small plume of green flames dangerously close to my styled and braided mane. I stepped backwards with my eyes widening a little before coughing out. "Dragon it is, then!" He snickered and nodded with a big grin dancing across his face. "My fire isn't normal dragon fire, though. I'm extra magical and can use the fire to transport things to wherever I think about when using it," he added, swinging back and forth as if pleased with himself. I was confused, however. "Wait, so it makes some sort of portal or something?" I inquired curiously, suddenly finding the little guy fascinating. At least he didn't seem to mind the attention I was giving him. "Haha, no. It kind of burns up, then just appears somewhere else, like magic," he exclaimed. Yet again, my brain did a flailing nosedive off a cliff. 1,000 questions came to mind, but I suddenly realized that assaulting him with them might seem kind of rude. The way he was explaining it, I decided he probably didn't know the answers any more than I did. I made a mental note not to never willingly use it for transportation, however. If it didn't actually send the object, instead destroying it and making a copy at the location he considers, wouldn't that technically kill living things? If it didn't, were they really the same individual as the one who got teleported? If one couldn't tell, was that still a bad thing? The moral and ethical questions confused me deeply. Spike was oblivious to my inner turmoil, thankfully. I mostly use it to send letters for Twilight, he added happily before starting to load up a tray I hadn't seen him pull out. Oh, the food! To my surprise, however, the sets of toast were done to perfection and already placed on a large plate. Sorry for zoning out so much, Spike. I didn't really help you much. I apologized, suddenly feeling bad about it. He had seemed so happy to be getting the help earlier, too. Spike snickered and waved a claw to me as he finished loading the tray. It's fine, Mender. You had a rough night, so it doesn't surprise me you're a little out of it today. The company was totally worth it. Can't we get this upstairs, though? He glanced over at the tray, suddenly seeming to realize that it was several times his size. I smiled, teasing, "Don't you want to use your flames to move it up there?" A faint blush appeared on his cheeks before he shook his head, admitting, "I can't exactly control how the objects come out. With our luck, the tray would flip over and land on them." That would indeed be bad. Eating breakfast is good. Being covered in it? Not so much. I reached out and touched the tray with my left hoof. It was simple enough. The tray and contents lost gravity instantly, and I snapped a thin, contorted barrier over the food on top to prevent any unfortunate drifting that might happen. Spike gave a questioning look due to the effects of being not exactly visible to the naked eye. It shifted to amusement and a rapid clapping as I slid the tray off the counter and drifted it through the air towards the stairs. Once the properties of an object were changed, the small symbols I put on them would remain charged for quite a while after I broke contact. That was the basic thinking I remember being taught. More advanced ones gave methods in which to place self-charged recharging batteries onto the enchantments, allowing for significantly more permanent effects. They required a tremendous amount of focus and magic to start up, though, and that was currently well outside of my capacity. Spike snagged the tray out of the air and pulled it up the stairs, scooting himself backwards as he went. The anti-gravity enchantment seemed to amuse him to no end. Of course, I could hardly cancel the true effect of gravity out of an object. That had considerably more energy than my entire body possessed. Mass manipulation enhancements were extremely hard. Now, a basic effect to provide omnidirectional counter-thrusting to match the force of gravity on the object, that was a lot easier. Spike gleefully made it up to the top of the stairs and turned in the direction of Twilight's bed. I smiled at his youthful exuberance as I went up the stairs significantly slower. Up was far safer than down when traversing stairs in my current body, but I still didn't want to trip and plant my face into the steps. Idly, I wondered if the girls really would enjoy this little gift. My brows raised questioningly, however, as I saw Spike freeze shortly after turning the corner, claws extending up to his mouth and eyes widening. Uh-oh. Sensing potential disaster, I sped up upon nearing the top of the stairs. Thankfully, I only managed to trip once. Stumbling to a somewhat complete stop, I finally managed to turn just as Spike started to smirk instead. The girls must have heard my fumbling in some far-off corner of their dreamland. Both stirred gently, still tucked under the warm embrace of the covers. A smile crept onto my mouth before I could stop it as the stirring made them snuggle closer into each other. Fluttershy's muzzle and cheek were lightly pressed into Twilight's chest as the lavender unicorn had both her front legs wrapped around her friend. Honestly, it looked like she was holding some sort of stuffed animal. Actually, now that I thought about it, the yellow princess probably was going to have a small heart attack upon waking up. Twilight, Fluttershy, breakfast is ready, Spike gently called out before I could properly warn him. Both men stirred gently after barely a second, Fluttershy opening her eyes up first. She looked disoriented in that brief moment where you have to cognitively register where you are after falling out of your dreams. The look of confusion rapidly slipped into surprise, and then panicked as she looked fully up at Twilight. Twilight, for her part, didn't seem to notice it all anyway. She was busy releasing a planet-cracking yawn. At one moment I amused myself with watching the little thingy in the back of her mouth shiver back and forth before she finally stopped yawning and blinked sleepily. By then, Fluttershy had started shivering uncontrollably and couldn't seem to break eye contact. Twilight slowly looked down, eyes widening in surprise, but not quite slipping into the panic her friend seemed to be displaying. "Oh, I'm sorry, Fluttershy. We must have moved in our sleep," she reasoned, probably dead on as per usual. Fluttershy was still mostly frozen, but I watched her eyes soften a little as Lavender Unicorn's warm smile. Note to self, my filly friend is amazingly unfazed by waking up to cuddling with her best friend. Even in my head, that sounded a little weird, and not because of the cuddling part. I decided I still was having problems considering myself as her cult friend. Spike managed to remain smiling, even though I heard the suppressed, airy snickering from this close. "I'm sure you two are hungry as well. Man had a really good idea, so here you go. Breakfast is served," he asked, giving a hammy bow before sliding the tray through the air. It drifted low before gently landing on and sliding across the surface of the bed. Twilight looked more surprised by the tray than the fact that she woke up to Fluttershy, ironically. "Wait, did you guys make us breakfast in bed?" "Aww," she cooed, smiling even wider now. Fluttershy snapped out of her system shock and glanced at the tray in front of her as well as she sat up to equal Twilight's height. Spike wasted no time in hopping up on the other side of the tray and sitting across from Twilight. "Yep, he even helped me make it. I should have totally thought of this before," he exclaimed, tone indicating he felt he was silly. "Hey, you did most of the cooking. Plus you would have had too hard a time getting the food upstairs," I reasoned, to try to redirect his self-chastisement, not to mention the credit. Fluttershy was now blushing fiercely and looking down at the tray. I had the sneaking suspicion that it wasn't me who caused the tinted cheeks, however. "Thank you. You two are wonderful. You really know how to treat two mares," Twilight spoke up, smirking over at Fluttershy before shifting to a more questioning expression. There was a long, awkward moment where Fluttershy continued to zone out while blushing, and Twilight stared blankly at her. I was a little awkward too, but for other reasons. I realized that I was rather hungry myself, having thrown up most of my supper last night. There was a problem, however. Breakfast was sitting on Twilight's bed. Her bed. Bed! I might be rather naive from time to time, but I knew that the favorite location of private time was, in fact, the bed. Due to a very informative conversation with Pinky and Applejack a while back, I had a sneaking suspicion that the concept was fairly universal between our worlds. Are you okay, Fluttershy?" Twilight asked hesitantly, finally running out of patience, it would seem. A timid yellow Pegasus snapped out of it with a start and nod rapidly. "Oh, yes, I'm fine," she assured, not sounding assuring in the least. Twilight's expression said she didn't buy it, but she sighed and nodded before gesturing towards the food again. "You should really eat something, Fluttershy. I'm sorry again about moving in my sleep." Twilight apologized softly, gently brushing Fluttershy's right shoulder. Fluttershy started to shake her head towards the tray before she stopped and gave me a questioning look. Damn it, I'd hoped they'd be too distracted with their food an awkward moment to notice mine. I carried forth this, sitting down on the floor next to the bed and peeking over at my share of the food. Maybe Twilight wouldn't notice if I could... "Mender, what are you doing?" Aforementioned Lavender Unicorn asked. "Damn it!" I swallowed and glanced over at the confused-looking unicorn before trying a reassuring smile. Sitting down? I'm kinda hungry," I complained, trying not to be too snarky. I'd noticed that I'd been getting a little sardonic as of late. Not that it was necessarily a bad thing, but I didn't want to be rude. I was deadly sharp of mind, I kept forgetting. She smirked instead, assuring, "It's okay if you sit on the bed, Mender. There's no stigma against it, and besides, you technically are my cult friend now, remember?" Blushing at her implications, I gave in and slowly climbed up onto the bed. "I suppose. I just don't want to do something stupid by assuming and offend you," I admitted, settling into a comfortable spot across from Fluttershy next to Spike. This still felt awkward, but I suppose knowing that the bed wouldn't be hurled at me for sitting on it was a good step in the right direction. Todd frowned for a microscopic moment before smiling again and nodding. It's not like we're being intimate. You're just eating with us, she reassured before taking a bite out of her toast finally. Fluttershy, who had been reduced to a timid silence during the exchange, nodded to me as well.
Admittedly, it is a, well, nice concept. It would make me feel so much better some nights if we were to push up against. Sometimes I get really scared in my house all alone,
she furthered softly. She was looking down at her fur, which oddly left me wondering which one of us she was addressing that to. She wore a light blush regardless, and Twilight gave her a curious look. Somehow I had a sneaking suspicion that she was referring to a more platonic cuddling than anything. My smile softened towards her.
I didn't realize you thought of Mender that much, Fluttershy. You really like him, don't you?
Twilight asked gently, smile not even flickering. I know, because I was watching it like a hawk. It was still hard to believe that she was so open-minded about Fluttershy liking me too. Was their culture that different, or was it more of a Twilight thing? I discovered that I was looking for any indication of her secretly disliking it that I could find. Realizing that, I started questioning my own motives over the ordeal. I was afraid of offending the Lavender Mare, obviously, but some of the doubts stemmed from myself instead. I didn't really consider myself worthy of them both. Why did I consider myself worthy of either of them individually? That, of course, reminded me of the awkward conversation from last night. That reminds me, what's a herd? I blurted out before seriously considering what I was asking. I should really stop doing that, I decided in hindsight. Fluttershy seemingly forgot that she couldn't breathe while eating eggs and suddenly started coughing and hacking like mad. Spike started to laugh a split second before Twilight made a gagging sound and spit half of the contents of her orange juice cup all over him. My eyes widened and I leaned forward to pat Fluttershy on the back as she leaned over the tray. At least my filly friend seemed in less immediate danger of choking to death. Ugh! Ew! Spike complained immediately, looking down at himself with both arms indignantly spread in dripping orange juice. Fluttershy seemed to finally regain her composure and adopted a new fire-red tint to her cheeks as she looked back up at me in surprise. Twilight's cheeks were similarly tinted, although noticeably less than her friend's. Maybe it was a shade difference due to their extreme coat colorings. The Lavender Mare shook her head before sighing and asking, "You remember that from what the guard told you last night, right?" I nodded weakly, wondering if I should be worried for my safety now. She continued regardless, seeming less upset and significantly more awkward.
A herd is an older tradition in Equestria. It seems all the way back to when we were still nomadic. But the legal and cultural aspects are still practiced today from time to time, she explained quietly, not making eye contact. In a slight bizarre oddity, Fluttershy actually seemed a little more comfortable with the topic, continuing where Twilight left off with, "Yes, a lot of animals will still use the concept, and it's obviously still important to us ponies too, due to our slightly off-balanced gender ratios. A herd then is as simple as multiple mares and stallions in a family or relationship together."
That was it? Seemed simple enough, but was far more flexible than I anticipated. So it wasn't just one member of a gender sharing multiple opposite gender partners, but simply a group of ponies in said situation with potentially multiple on each side. It made sense if it was originally for a nomadic lifestyle. Unity and protection would be significantly greater. So the guard last night was insinuating that we were trying to form one? I asked, largely for clarity. Well, not in so many words, as he chose a lot more that were significantly more degrading. That wouldn't do it all. The Shy Pegasus shot back to embarrass in a heartbeat and shrank back down again. Todd took her own turn to recover and let forth a snicker of amusement for rubbing her friend on the back.
Well, for right now we're just a couple. If Fluttershy would like to join in the future, we'd tackle that then, but I read that it works a lot better if the members of a herd are friends before joining, so I can honestly see it going well,
Twilight pointed out. At this point, her referencing the fact that she's read about this topic didn't surprise me in the least. Was there a topic she hadn't read about yet? Spike, who I totally forgot was there, gave me a questioning glance over the two mares before swallowing a large mouthful of toast. Wait, doesn't that mean that you and Fluttershy would be in a relationship too? He questioned cautiously, taking a strange interest in the topic. Wait, he probably shouldn't have asked that. Fluttershy gave an almost miserable sound mix between a groan and a squeak before sinking lower to her side of the tray. I resisted smiling as I went back to gently rubbing her shoulder to try and comfort her. Spike's studious mother surrogate raised an eyebrow to him, but finally giggled nonchalantly.
Well, sometimes. I've never, considered being with a mare before, but I couldn't see any harm in it. I care deeply for Fluttershy as a friend, of course, but I can't speak for how she'd feel for that, Spike. Be gentle, she warned before turning to the now visibly shocked yellow mare next to her. You really mean it? Fluttershy asked in disbelief. I could see the muscles along her foreleg shivering as she asked, her wings twitching behind her lightly, what seemed to be a mix of panic and surprise. I suddenly realized that all three of us liking each other might actually have a possibility of working. That was a little scary for some reason. My sense of self-establishment inferiority started creeping up again. Things were getting complicated, and the urge to distance myself reared its head again. The more complex something got, the higher the probability of something going wrong. Of course, Fluttershy. You had best eat something before the wonderful meal the boys made us gets cold, Twilight reminded gently. The shy Pegasus gave a start before turning back to the tray of food in front of her. Yeah, I'm sorry, she rapidly murmured, gaze shifting between Spike and me. I smiled softly to her, and my scaly friend gave a nonchalant wave of a claw while stuffing a frightening amount of hash browns into his mouth. Fluttershy simply giggled before resuming her own meal. My smile dropped away as I lost the focus of attention again. Why was I doubting this? I liked both mares. Twilight maybe just a little more due to experience and proximity. Wasn't this the perfect opportunity then? It seemed almost too perfect. Admittedly, my natural sense of paranoia was a little cautious. It didn't help that I kept getting stuck on the fact that these mares were national, maybe worldly even, heroines. How did I deserve such amazing mares? Finally, like a shadow looming over the whole thing, I worried that things involving Keela and the other dimension would spill over at the worst possible time. So yeah, things were getting complex. Twilight drew her attention back up to me. I caught it this time and rapidly resumed eating so as to not draw unwanted attention to myself. This is hopefully going to be an easy day anyway. I hoped that thought wouldn't come back to bite me again. The resounding vibrations drifted through my skull as my momentum slowed to a halt. The cold wood contrasted my now heated and pulsing skin just along the bridge of my nose and muzzle. Groaning, I slowly slid my head down the unmoving wood, eyes still closed. Damn it. Laughter danced along my hearing from somewhere in front of me. It was a hearty, carefree laugh with a familiar voice behind it. I reckon your asset still ain't fully recovered? Applejack inquired in an amused tone. At least I assumed it was the country-flavored Earth Pony. If it wasn't, some pony was one heck of a voice actor. I take it you found out about the incident yesterday? Twilight asked softly as she helped me back to all four hooves without hesitating the slightest. She adjusted quickly to my penchant for hurting myself. At least I was expecting to be fully recovered by tomorrow. Magic was amazing. Opening my eyes finally, I saw a slightly fuzzy version of Applejack nod earnestly. Yep, Dash came by yesterday and told all about it. You're one lucky stallion, she remarked, walking over to give Twilight a hoof and moving me into the room. It usually doesn't feel that way, I muttered, giving out a stiff groan as I was forcibly moved next to the inside wall of the barn. My, as if hard to believe, filly friend snickered playfully before suggesting, well, just in case your right in physics still hates you, you're just going to be telling us what to do today. No handling sharp and pointy objects when you're still half blind. Applejack laughed as well, seemingly ignoring my eye roll. That's probably a good idea. I'm going to keep working with the supports until Dash and Fluttershy get here. My brother asked if you could make some plans up for the design, too, she requested, turning to walk back in the direction of the half-done conveyor, but glancing back over her shoulder at us. Twilight perked up, probably noticing that this stage of the project would make full use of her talents. Oh, certainly. Mender will explain the design and I'll draw it up as precise as possible, she assured, again promising my support without actually asking me. Well, it wasn't like I would have turned down the farm mare, but it still would have been nice to at least be consulted what my workload would be. I took it up to her knowing me, though. Thank you kindly, Twi. And you too, Mender. This would have been entirely impossible without your talents, she thanked, sounding more sincere than I thought a pony could. Smiling, I nodded softly to her as I plopped down into a lying position with my butt to the wall.
The lavender unicorn sat down next to me before giving a smirk and lighting her horn up with magic. Almost a dozen logs drifted to my position from a new pile that had apparently appeared there overnight. Oh yeah, Applejack had been shorted by over half her required parts. Note to self, find out whom she bought the kit from and blacklist him or her from any of my future business.
Hey Spike, are you coming?
Tully called out a moment later, aiming for the door next to us, it sounded like. Oddly enough, I could still feel what the part was shaped like from when I last scanned it. I didn't think my memory was that good, so I snagged the original again and started to rescan it. That was the last thing I needed, to go through all the parts, only to discover that I made a noticeable error in the duplication process. Applejack would probably kill me for wasting so much wood, too. My thoughts were interrupted by the grumbling of the little dragon as he hauled a rather sizable saddlebag set in from outside of the barn. Yeah, this isn't the lightest, you know, he complained, causing me to smile over at him. He was an extremely hard worker. Of course, Todd had been wearing the pack up until we got to the barn, so at least he didn't have to drag it far, which was good. If Verity were here, she'd probably kill us all for mistreating an accessory by dragging it through the dirt like that. Oh, I ordered the metal parts, too. They said they'd come sometime today, Applejack chimed in. Oh yeah, I'd forgotten she'd need more than just the wooden segments I was making. They're kind of pointless if there was nothing to attach them to. I hope you didn't go through the same pony, I returned, shaking my head slightly. It still made me mad that someone had taken advantage of my friend. Sure, we had gotten off to a rough start, but Applejack had been extremely nice to me ever since that had been patched up. Ha! You ain't gonna get a lick of apple business ever again, don't worry. These parts are from out of town. A little more expensive, but I'm guaranteed to get the whole order, you know? She informed, sounding injustifiably irked. Good. I've half a mind to go visit him myself and discuss the definition of product fraud. Twilight grumbled as she pulled out several sheets of paper from the saddlebags that were now in front of her. Spike wobbled a little before dramatically falling over next to her. Oddly, it kind of reminded me of Rarity. Go figure. It ain't worth the trouble. It'll hurt him enough to lose the apple business. Besides, I might have found somebody to take over the construction needs. She returned with a playful tone in the last part. A little flag went off in my mind, and I glanced up from my scanning work just in time to see the orange mist smiling at me from the top of the conveyor's main support. Wait, was she talking about me? He drifted into my cheeks as my eyes widened. I think that's a very good choice, Applejack. He's brilliant at engineering from what we've seen so far. So I chimed in using a sweet tone and a nuzzle to my shoulder. I let out a weak groan and buried my head in my forelegs, feeling the heat radiating off it. Tut let out a light giggle before I heard the papers rustling into position. You're too humble, Mender. You must realize how much this is helping us, right? The farmer questioned curiously, yet it sounded to be a distracted tone. Curious again, I peeked up at her, latching a hammer to her hoof using a simple leather strap. She lined up a couple more nails with her mouth and lightly held them with her free hoof as she tapped them in. The act seemed so precise that it left me in awe for a moment. If I had tried that, Twilight would be reattaching my hoof. I knew she was strong, but watching her reinforce the supports displayed a totally unrealized level of finesse from her. No, don't try doing that, Mender. Twilight suddenly advocated cautiously, apparently practically reading my mind. She wore an amused smirk as I glanced over at her. Yeah, no. I like my hoof in one solid chunk, thanks. Worse yet would be making extra work for you, I agreed, returning a much softer smile. She looked momentarily amused before softening as well, probably guessing that I was purposely trying to appease her. What was the term for that? Sweet talking? The situation seemed similar to when Twilight had accused me of that before. Maybe it wasn't a bad thing. Don't get distracted, Casanova. We have work to do, she murmured tenderly. Of course, she accompanied it with a tantalizing and agonizingly slow muzzle along the side of my cheek, doing the exact opposite of keeping me focused. It was strange, but I had a strong compulsion to push her over onto her side and start kissing her, so that I'll probably get a bad reaction. Reminding myself that she could tie bows inside of my insides without touching me, I managed to resist. Somehow. The heat rushing to my head certainly didn't make it easy. Oh, come on! Last night wasn't enough smooching for you two? Spike suddenly groaned out, sounding appalled.
Twilight snapped back instantly and looked over at the annoyed little dragon. Applejack, who had apparently stopped hammering at some point, was now watching with a surprised expression on a slack jaw, shifting to that of an amused, and started chuckling. I reckon you would think a little different if it was rare in yourself, she reasoned pointedly. Wait, she knew about Spike's crush? If she was okay with speaking of it so plainly, Twilight must know about it too. Spike grumbled something under his breath and crossed his arms. Applejack snickered, but spun the hammer with a flick of her hoof and resumed lightening up nails. She continued to speak as she worked, with, "It was a little surprising, though. You finally decided to admit feelings and bury the hatchet?" "It took a while, but I think he's finally more comfortable with me," Twilight agreed readily enough, missing my eye roll shortly after. It wasn't entirely my fault that I was terrified of making her mad. Disregarding the most obvious retort, I decided to just resume my scan. Amusingly enough, it turned out that my memory seemed to be spot on from the last one I did. Maybe there's some sort of intrinsic memory involved with imprinting the scan in my mind. Regardless, I'll lock down the shape and set the part aside. From my yet imperfect vision, I noticed that the stack of logs was over to the left side of me. I reached up to touch one on when the top log drifted free and landed softly in front of me. Smiling, I gave the unicorn a nod, even if she was currently looking down at her papers. It didn't surprise me in the least that she could manipulate the logs without looking. "I meant you, Twa," Applejack corrected a moment later. Uh-oh. The farmer had serious guts, I'll say that much. Well, she was also a good friend of Twilight's, so she could get away with saying a lot more than I could. I decided not to look up. Maybe if I didn't see the death coming, I'd survive. "Hey, I admit my feelings for him." "Well, okay, fine. I might have been a little on the hesitant side, but I've never done this before," the lavender unicorn protested, suddenly seeming extremely flustered. Well, that wasn't the anticipated reaction. I expected more yelling and homicide. I kept my head down through the moment of silence, busying myself by making cutting patterns in the log in front of me. They hunted mainly through motion and terror, I had heard. If I remained absolutely still and avoided eye contact, they shouldn't be able to see me. The log is significantly larger than the one I worked with last time, I suddenly noticed. I managed to fit 3 full-length stacks inside of it, allowing for 18 sections from one. That meant we should only need 5 or 6 and still have plenty of spares left over. As pleasing as the aspect was, I realized that I only had done 4 stacks before causing my nose to explode in blood and the most distracting sensation of a nail being driven into my forehead. That wasn't going to be pretty. And this wasn't going to be pretty. "I think you're both perfect for each other, frankly. You share enough similarities to get along, and not enough to murder each other," Applejack admitted, gaining a snicker from myself. The mare spoke truth. It made me realize that Rainbow and she actually were very similar to Twilight and me, minus the massive competitive streak they had going. They shared a lot of similarities and lacked the overlapping skill set. Twilight nodded in my peripheral vision before adding, "Agreed. It's nice to be able to talk about magical things to some pony. It helps that he's actually neat and tidy, too. Well, we're not bleeding all over things." I gave her a skeptical glance, only to receive a tantalizing one in return. She was such a brat sometimes. She continued her verbal rampage before I could retort, however. "Still, at least she has a sense of organization and cleanliness in the first place. Right, Spike?" She asked with a bit of a bite to her tone. Whoa, when did he get to turn on her bad side? "Hey, what did I do?" he asked instantly, apparently knowing just as much about his offense as I did. That didn't bode well. I had just started to become friends with him, too. The exasperated unicorn sighed wearily. "You filled up the bin under my drafting table with cut-up pieces of paper, Spike. It was 2 inches over the top of the thing. Did you think I wouldn't notice?" she questioned bluntly. Cut-up pieces of paper? I glanced at the same time Applejack did, apparently, her expression shifting to one of dubious curiosity rather than mirroring my merely interested one. "What? No, those were all over Mender's bed when I got up. All I did was pick them up," he defended animatedly. "Wait, what? Oh. I knew I forgot something." Twilight slowly rotated around to give me a skeptical yet confused look. Applejack shifted even further to the disbelieving side of the spectrum as her eyebrow rose sharply on the left side. Well, crap.